This is such a fantastic reading for Divine Mercy Sunday. Fantastic reading. Now, I know that a lot of you like to hear about Thomas, but we've already had that talk. So, we're going to dive into church history in the spirit of Christ's words today, whose sins you forgive are forgiven them, and whose sins you retain are retained. So with that said, allow me to tell you, call it a Catholic fairy tale. The story I'm about to tell you is true and historical. I'm merely adding some drama to the narration, which is just something I do. And although the way I tell the story, this is called The King in the Snow. Once upon a time, 1,000 years ago, there lived a man. This was not a bad man, and he wasn't an evil man. In fact, he took his vows more seriously than most, and he was more honorable than those that came before him and those that came after him. But this man believed in power. And as his career went on, he believed more and more that power was his and his alone to possess, and that there was no real need for him to share his power. And although it's not the name he was born with, we remember this man as Pope Gregory VI. Now, Pope Gregory VI had one great rival in his life, King Henry IV. It's funny, in another life, these two guys would be like best friends. They had so much in common. They were both really good leaders. They both really cared about their people. But they both hated the idea of sharing power with one another. Now, to be fair, popes and kings have been butting heads over their overlap of power for quite some time, many centuries. But these two guys took it to a whole nother level. It became, after a while, an all-or-nothing fight, as both of them tried to utterly destroy one another. The Pope excommunicated the king, and the king called the Pope a false monk, and they both did everything they could to replace the other. Allow me to skip ahead a little bit. After a while, this all went on, and eventually Pope Gregory came out in the superior position. Just more people were siding with the Pope as the ultimate authority in this world. And the princes and other minor rulers of the day gave King Henry IV an ultimatum. They said, you need to go and resolve your differences with the Pope, which is basically saying, it's time you surrender, because we won't support you otherwise if you don't. Now, this would have been an utterly humiliating defeat for the king. This would be the end of his glory years for his reign. And this final resolution between Pope and king was going to take place in Augsburg, Germany, in early 1077. So, Pope Gregory departs from Rome to go to Augsburg in January of 1077 for what would be his triumph over King Henry IV. Well, on the way to Augsburg, he gets stuck in the snow in the Alps. It's too heavy of snow. This happens from time to time, and he took shelter in a castle. One of the counts of that area of northern Italy just put him up for a few days to wait out the snowstorm. Again, this wasn't a big deal. This happened from time to time when you had to cross the Alps. Well, while he was waiting in this little castle to continue his journey, the worst possible thing for the Pope happened. The king caught up to him. The king came up and got off his horse, or out of his carriage anyway. I always picture kings on horseback. Gets off, goes up to the gates, looks up at the castle, and gets down on his knees and starts begging in the snow for the Pope's forgiveness and absolution. A king begging in the snow. Now, for those of you paying attention to my story, you should be confused, because I just said that the worst possible thing happened for the Pope. Who wouldn't want their arch rival begging in the snow at the door of your house? Indeed, the housekeepers or the politically naive probably thought this was a great thing, like, yay, Pope, all right, good job. But they probably didn't say that, but still. Pope Gregory and his advisors knew better. They knew this was a big deal, because if Pope Gregory went out and forgave the king would be restored to his moral status, and he would lose every advantage he had over the king. Likewise, if he refused to forgive the king, he would be proving himself that false monk that the king claimed he was. Again, he would lose every political advantage he had gained over the months and years, and he would lose everything. So this is what his advisors said to him. They said, "Your Holiness, if you have even an ounce of sense in that brain of yours, this is what you're going to do. You are going to get your cloak on, you are going to sneak out the back door, and you are going to travel to Augsburg no matter how difficult the road is. And when you get to Augsburg, you are going to lie. And you are going to say that you never saw the king, that he just missed you in the Alps, you didn't have the chance to forgive him, and then you'll continue with the proceedings. And if you do that, you'll win." I have no idea how long it took the Pope to make his decision. That detail isn't in any of the books. I picture it was like an hour, like this power-hungry Pope, this man who really believed that he was literally the most important person on earth, just pacing back and forth, tearing his hair out about what to do. Well, one way or another, he did make his decision. He put on his cloak, opened the door, walked out into the snow, walked over to the king, and gave him absolution. Unfortunately for the Pope, things proceeded exactly the way his advisors said it would. The king was restored to moral status again, his people believed in him once again, and the Pope was eventually disgraced and ultimately exiled by the king. And our final words of him are, "I have loved righteousness and hated iniquity. Therefore, I die in exile." And thus ends the story of the king in the snow and the fall of the Pope. To be honest, I've been waiting months to tell you this story. Months. I've been waiting for a reading about power or forgiveness. And there's a reason I've been itching to tell this story, because there's a major lesson to be learned here in this real-life tale from 938 years ago. I am no fan of Pope Gregory's leadership style. In fact, I'm bothered by the fact that we remember him as a saint for his work for the church hierarchy. That does not make sense to me. You don't get to heaven by securing your own power base. Well, regardless of my idealistic issues with Gregory, I do believe he's a saint, and I do believe he's in heaven for one reason and one reason alone. In that one moment of truth, which may come only once per lifetime, Gregory made the right choice. He saw that king begging in the snow, and he knew that he could either fulfill his priestly duties and forgive sin, because again, he took his vows seriously. He believed in priestly virtue and the forgiveness of sins. He could do that. Or he could inherit ultimate political power. Only saints and crazy people would choose priestly duty over ultimate power. That night, Pope Gregory proved that his loyalty was to God more so than his own ambition. as ample as that ambition may have been. And I fully believe that Christ's first words to him in heaven were, "Come and stand at my side, my good and faithful servant, because the sins you forgive on earth will be forgiven of you in return." And that is Divine Mercy Sunday. Now, I desperately, desperately hope that I am never a ruler like Pope Gregory VI. But I do hope and pray that one day I can be a priest like Pope Gregory VI. In that one moment where it mattered more than all the empires in all the world. What would you do with that king in the snow?